Hey, welcome on in, guys. Tobin here with you, and thanks for checking out the channel. I'm here in the studio green rooms today. Just getting some thoughts. I got to head down to the Heat game tonight, but just got done listening to Mike McDaniel's press conference, was cutting that puppy up for the radio station, and I don't know what Mike McDaniel's supposed to say with regards to the Miami Dolphins and where they stand going into Tuesday's trade deadline. I'm doing this at 3 p.m. on Monday, so if anything happens in the midst of me posting, which is always dangerous around a trade deadline, you'll excuse the outdated content. But Twitter was a little bit of buzz today because Drew Rosenhaus went on WSVN for his traditional hit. He's been doing that forever. And he said that the Miami Dolphins, he implied that the Dolphins were buyers, though he kind of did a little bit of agent speak where he said, I know over the past few weeks, the Dolphins had been making calls to try and make their team better, and that by no means does he think the Dolphins are going to give up on this season. And so it wasn't like, I think the takeaway from that was he thinks the Dolphins are buyers. I think that maybe the Dolphins were thinking about being buyers because obviously if the Dolphins win these last 2 weeks and they're 500, you're in a much different spot. Maybe you do think about doing something a little wacky, a little irresponsible. I don't know how in good conscience the Dolphins could make a crazy swing at anything right now. If anything, you have to hope that your best acquisitions really are health with, getting Sealer back, Chubb's eventual return. Like, how many guys are you going to get on the market now that are going to be more valuable than getting a Bradley Chubb? Not many. So I don't really see the purpose in the Miami Dolphins going out there. You even saw, even if you wanted to look on the offensive side, you said like, hey, let's third receiver. Like, I guess Odell didn't make his presence known. Jonnu Smith has kind of emerged. Like, I think the offense is rolling in a pretty good spot right now. Certainly there's got to be concerns with the pass rushing ability, but I don't know what the Dolphins do in that case. Chop Robinson got his first sack. Agba's toughened through it, and when Chubb comes back, Chubb comes back. This idea that the Dolphins could go out there and throw assets at this problem right now, I think is pretty ludicrous and pretty crazy. I don't know how you get a team to stop playing stupid. I don't know how you do it. I guess your answers quickly in the chat or your comments will be the coach, and I don't have a good retort for that because I guess you can't get rid of every player. But honestly, I was listening to Mike today because he was asked about Drew's comments and that his overall, I don't want to hit you guys with all his meandering, but his overall thought is that he thinks the team is better than their record, which I think 2 weeks ago he was like, our record is what it is. But now he thinks the team is better because the offense is humming. So now all of a sudden he's feeling froggy about it. But he thinks that the team is better than their record. At least he's hinting at that. And that's Chris Greer hasn't come to him with anything concrete, but that they still have faith in the roster. And I guess my question in something like this, right? When people say that and they say we're better than our record says, and I would look at the Dolphins' talent and the names on the roster and look at them on paper. When we do that's a win, that's a loss, that's typically what we do. And I would agree with Mike. I would look at the roster and I would look at the names and I would look at the past statistics of these guys, and I would agree. If I just looked at the roster, that should speak to a better record than what they have. That I think the talent amassed should be better than what they have. But there are things in football and there are things in team sports that sometimes whatever you want to believe or you think that the accumulation of all the talent that you have, that you think it's going to be better, but it just doesn't work. And a lot of it just has to do with mistakes or execution and just finding ways to lose left and right. And I think that whatever that culture setting is or whatever that delineation is, I don't know. I don't have the secret sauce to that. Otherwise, I guess my fat ass would be an NFL head coach. I'd be there eating my chips, trying to figure it out, and be like, we're gonna figure out this snapping issue. But in all seriousness, if you're Mike McDaniel and you've seen your team really throw away 3 games, and have critical errors where you've dictated the game, like you've put it in your hands and you've relinquished that to your opponent. And knowing that they played very good in Buffalo, I think that I was fair in saying that the Buffalo game, probably the best start to finish game I've seen them play, but they still had the game in control nonetheless. Ball out of the half with the lead, and they put it on the ground. So if that keeps happening, and it's happening with your best guys are making mistakes. The guys that you that would lead you to have that opinion that the team is better than their record says. At what point are you just what you are? Like, at what point? And I know what he has to say. Like, I'm not stupid. I know that the team has to go out there and they have to say all these things. Guys' jobs are on the line. They have to have some reasoning with it. And to be fair, I will say, hey, your starting quarterback missed 4 games. Huge part of it. You probably would have had a better record in that case, at least by a game. At least by a game, probably by 2. But what happened. And you're in the spot that you're in the spot. And he has come back for the last 2 games, and you've had the ability to win the last 2 games, and you didn't. So what am I to do with it? What is that supposed to mean to any of the fans out there? It was interesting hearing the callers saying there's a lot of people upset, but I had guys who were, fans who are genuinely, and I thought some comments that made good points like that. The bad fans are louder right now than the good fans because the fans are just busted up right now. It's always easier to be pessimistic as a fan than it is to be optimistic. But there's also so much time on the clock, right? And the Dolphins, realistically, on making a playoff run, you probably need to be 10-7, which gives you the ability to go out there and go 8-1 the rest of the way. Like that's your margin for error. And I'm nervous as hell as the Dolphins going out to the West Coast, playing a primetime game. Typically hasn't been a good formula for the Miami Dolphins. Typically hasn't been. Even if you look at the records and you say, they should beat this team, they should beat this team, they should beat this. Dude, they've lost to teams already this year, and you're like, how? How is that a team that this football team lost to? Because you look at the names, and even with their quarterback being out, you're like, they got to be able to find a way. And even if you thought they found a way, they still found a way to screw it up. The Indy game's the one that probably sticks out the most, is the one that really, really hurts. But even going back to the Seattle game, which is not an easy place to go win, but you had your chances, you had your opportunities, and you still couldn't come through. And so now you're in this spot where desperation is absolutely here. And what are your reasonings? You want to throw 3 years ago in my face at that? And I say this as somebody who is very optimistic about this team coming in. And I agree with Mike. I looked at the talent on this team, and I'm like, I think this team could win the division, and I look a fool. But the thing that is disappointing about it is those guys that I had belief in, the Mosterts, the Tuas, the Tyreek Hills, the Waddles, they've all either underperformed, been unavailable, or had huge errors. And sometimes with this, they've done multiple in those categories to lead the Dolphins to where they're at right now. So to go to Drew's point about the Dolphins being, not giving up on the talent, I think that's probably what's going to happen if I had to guess. I would say the Dolphins are probably going to be in a spot where they won't give up because of the Tua games. They're going to try and ride this puppy out. Mind you, they still have 3 cold weather games coming up this year. Sheesh. But that aside, I think 2 things. One, Drew and Chris Greer obviously have a very good relationship. He represents a lot of players on the team, a lot of the star players on the team. And in a lot of ways. There was at one point Drew basically represented like half the defense. I don't think that's the case anymore, but at one point he did. And from my standpoint, I think he, wants to keep that good relationship. So it makes it seem like they have a strong front. They're not desperate. You're not trying to burn bridges, but I wouldn't buy a lot into what Drew Rosenhaus is saying there. I really wouldn't. And, for Mike today to sit there and say, oh, I think I have a belief that our record is better. It's like, hey, I want to believe that too. I think every Dolphin fan who's still optimistic wants to believe that. But how do you get through these damn games with just stubbing your toe instead of just shooting yourself in the foot? Like, every one of these errors seems like it snowballs and kills the Dolphins' chances, or swings the game completely, or gives life to a team that should be dead in the water. Look at the names on the roster all you want, but those same names are the ones screwing up and not coming through and not executing. And how many weeks in a row does that have to happen before you just believe that is what you are? Is the answer 3 weeks? Is the answer 4 weeks? How many more of these games in a row? I mean, really, right now, we're 9 weeks into the season, 8 games into the season. At what point are you just are what you are? And I think they've probably reached that point. I don't think it's realistic to think the Dolphins are coming back from this. And that's, see, and here's the part of that. Like, I think the Dolphins are riding good playing momentum for the most part. They did play a really good game. I agree. I know that I've made that point, but in a football season, that's hoping everything goes ideally your way in a season that's already not stacked up for ideal things to happen to you. Road games, tough schedule, elements. I think we all came into the year with the idea the Dolphins kind of had to fluff their schedule up, fluff their record up to bear the storm. And I'm not even talking opponents. I'm just talking about going out on the road, going into the elements for this. I guess you could say the Dolphins may be a little bit better suited because that power run game has looked really, really good. So maybe the Dolphins will be better suited when we get to these winter games, should they put themselves in a position to make a late playoff run. But I don't think it's the observer or the fan is asking too much to see it throughout a game. Can you do it throughout a game without some catastrophic error that just makes everybody want to put their head through a window? Because that is what it's been like watching this team for the last 3 weeks. Not just the season, but particularly these last 3 weeks.